verbal or life.
New York City is having a migrant crisis, and New York City residents are furious about it. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the videos and information that I think everybody should be aware of. Welcome to Verbal on Life. My name is Noel, battling MS, and I want to show this video to give people information because a lot of people seem to be in a bubble and not aware of what's really going on. So let's take a look at this video.
Governor Greg Abbott continues to send buses filled with migrants who cross the border illegally.
Filed a lawsuit against 17 companies that have taken part in Texas Governor Greg Abbott's scheme to transport tens of thousands of migrants to New York City.
6 more buses filled with migrants arrived at Port Authority. This was just hours after Mayor Adams issued that new executive order requiring bus companies to give.
New York City is making headlines again, this time for its stance on immigrant buses. Mayor Eric Adams has announced that the city will no longer allow buses transporting migrants to New York City to enter the city without a 32-hour notice. He said it's putting a strain on taxpayers' money, and the city is beginning to run out of shelters.
Now, this is just people being sent from Texas. You can only imagine the border state is being filled with people. You can only imagine how Texas is dealing with the millions of immigrants coming through. So, look at this man complaining now.
Despite that, Governor Greg Abbott kept sending buses of migrants to New York City.
National problem. This has only been exacerbated by Governor Abbott's cruel, inhumane.
It was the governor of New York that opened the city gates of New York to welcome asylum seekers.
Despite the circumstances that drove them to this country and to this state, we say you are welcome here. We are welcome with open arms, and we'll work to keep you.
In August of last year, Mayor Adams greeted a busload of asylum seekers who were sent to New York City from Texas by Governor Greg Abbott. Abbott said the reason he sent the buses there is because it is the responsibility of liberal cities to share the burden of the rise in asylum seekers along the southern border.
Completely agree. I mean, send them to all the sanctuary cities. See how they deal with it.
Interview with reporters when he went to greet the migrants, the mayor emphasized that his primary responsibility as the leader of New York City is to ensure access to essential services for families residing there. He stated that the city is obligated to uphold the right to shelter policy, which guarantees shelter to those in need, and he expressed pride in the city's commitment to providing this support. As the steady influx of buses carrying asylum seekers continued, Mayor Adams faced overwhelming challenges in providing shelter. After a year of struggling with this issue, he made an urgent appeal for financial assistance from the federal government and the state. Adams also asked for the right to shelter policy to be suspended while the city looks for workable solutions.
Yeah, they're taking advantage of the fact that everybody has a right to shelter, and New York City doesn't leave anybody out in the streets. Crazy.
Citing the city's incapacity to house the 110,000 asylum seekers who have entered since 2022. This is where it gets interesting. The right to shelter law, which has guaranteed shelter for those in need in the city for 40 years, was notably amended by the mayor in May.
So it makes perfect sense for people to come to New York because you know you're not going to have to sleep on the streets.
This action came at the same time that his
But comment below, what do you think?
administration asked for federal and state support to deal with the migration crisis, which he claims has the potential to devastate New York City as it stands.
New York has done its share. Our shelter system is buckling. Every service in this city is going to be impacted.
Executive Order 402, issued by Mayor Adams, made temporary changes to city laws. As a result, the city was no longer required to provide separate rooms for migrant families. Instead, they could be housed in shared accommodations within a designated shelter. In July,
You know, all this can be solved by just maybe blocking the border or doing a better job of not letting people come in. This is like the job of the president. Is a national problem, but that's just using common sense. Comment down below, what do you think? Because my take is they need to secure the border and maybe you don't have to deal with this.
the city official informed migrants that the city had reached capacity and intended to distribute flyers along the U.S.-Mexico border advising newly arrived migrants to consider relocating to a different location. Mayor Adams' decision to relocate asylum seekers to other cities marks a significant departure from his previous stance. During his election
All blue cities, all Democratic cities being flooded with individuals. Crazy.
campaign, he reaffirmed New York City's sanctuary status and promised to protect immigrants unconditionally. However, despite the legal mandate to provide shelter to individuals in need, New York City remains challenged. Mayor Adams has resorted to utilizing notable city landmarks, makeshift shelters, and temporary housing as temporary measures to address the demand for shelter. The city currently supports nearly 150,000 migrants, including approximately 21,000 new migrant children who began attending school this year. The overwhelming number of students has caused overcrowding in classrooms, leading some schools to reject new students at the start of the school year. Mayor Adams, overwhelmed with the ongoing situation, requested assistance from the state and federal governments to cover the expenses associated with asylum seekers. The city didn't receive the necessary aid immediately. As a result, the city allocated $4.7 billion from its budget, an amount equal to the combined budgets of the sanitation, fire, and parks departments in New York City.
Crazy. It's all a money game. I'm telling you, we don't need to be going through this, and we should stop people crossing over the border.
This is where it gets worse. Buses transporting numerous migrants kept arriving consistently, with at least 4 buses unloading at the Port Authority within 2 days. There was no room again to receive them. Several hotels in Manhattan, including the Roosevelt Hotel, Paul Hotel, and Paramount Hotel, have been assigned to provide temporary shelter for migrants. Outside these hotels, it became common to witness lengthy queues of migrants, primarily men from West Africa. The U.S. Homeland Security Department had to send a limited team to New York City to assist in evaluating appropriate federal government actions. After evaluation, the federal government promised the city $140 million. Despite the mayor's challenges to maintain migrants in the city, migrants kept flooding into New York City. In response to the influx, the mayor declared a state of emergency in autumn and termed it a humanitarian crisis.
That's crazy. State of emergency. Like, these people open up the gates saying, hey, everybody come in, and now they don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal with it, because it's not just money. It's the fact that they're overrunning hotels, taking over the streets, and committing crimes. Not all of them, but the few that are, hey, it shows too much.
In April, he attacked President Biden for allegedly ignoring the city's needs despite his repeated requests for more federal funding.
In over the past few months from other parts of the country. More than 17,000 asylum seekers, mostly.
The housing crisis is not only affecting New York City. Many other major cities are facing similar challenges. In May, Chicago residents were surprised to learn that a police station had been converted into an asylum seeker shelter. The reason...
Or you could say this is your fault. You guys voted this in.
For the spike in immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border was the repeal of Title 42, a deterrent policy implemented during the pandemic. However, for more than a year, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been transporting migrants from the U.S.-Mexico border to cities like New York, Washington, and Chicago.
He's doing a great job. And all he got to do is send them a memo saying, you voted for this. Who did you vote for? And the closer we get to the elections, the clearer it gets.
This has drawn strong criticism from Democratic leaders in those cities. Local officials have stated that the growing number of homeless and unemployed people moving into their area cannot be supported. Although he agreed that the situation was unsustainable, Republican Governor Abbott, speaking in New York, emphasized that he was not primarily responsible. Governor Abbott claimed that President Biden, not Texas, is responsible for the influx of migrants into New York. Abbott justified his busing program by citing the difficulties faced by small Texas border towns in managing the influx of migrants. Abbott also said that the situation at the border is dire and chaotic, and action is needed to address it. He urged...
And it's not up to Texas. It's not up to individual states to deal with the border. Again, this is a federal issue. from my understanding, the federal government needs to deal with this. And they got to stop saying, we're waiting for legislation, we're waiting for Congress, we're waiting for anybody. No, the president could just take a pen and sign things into law to prevent this from happening. And a lot of people are not aware of that, but please comment below. What do you think? Should the government do something? Step up. But just my opinion. Let's keep watching.
Urges the president to use his authority to prevent migrants from entering the country. Due to the urgency of the situation, he can't sit and wait for the government to take action. He has to do his best to protect his state. Governor Abbott enacted measures to enhance border security. Buoys have been deployed in the Rio Grande, acting as a floating barrier, increasing the challenges of crossing the river, especially for vulnerable populations like children. Razor wire has been installed along the border as an additional deterrent. Additionally, the state has funded transportation for migrants via buses to urban centers governed by Democratic officials, such as New York. Governor Abbott claims that Texas has provided bus tickets to approximately 42,000 individuals to relocate elsewhere. Since spring 2022, 15,800 have been sent to New York City. However, many more have moved to the northeastern United States independently or through assistance from organizations or local governments. He also stated that Texas receives no advance notice of bus arrivals carrying migrants, unlike New York City. He emphasized that New York City is calm and organized compared to the situation in Texas, which is far more chaotic. He claims that New York City only experiences a small portion of the large numbers of migrants that Texas has handled in recent years.
What is going on in New York is calm and organized compared to the real chaos of what we see on the border, not every day.
But what he said didn't sit well with Mayor Adams.
What Governor Abbott has done in his total reckless disregard for using people as pawns.
To curb the influx of migrants, Mayor Eric Adams enacted a temporary order restricting the locations and times when charter buses.
Again, you voted for this. This is partly your fault.
Can unload migrants within the city's limits. New York City's response to the ongoing migrant influx over the past year and a half has had a financial impact, which has influenced the Adams administration's current budget choices. His establishment of bus limits serves as a strategy to address the surge of migrants entering New York City. This limit started after 14 buses carrying migrants from Texas reached the city in one evening. That immigrant drop-off was the largest single-night arrival since the spring of 2022. The order requires charter buses carrying migrants to submit a list specifying the following information: total number of passengers on board, number of single adults, number of families with children, and number of children aboard any bus. The order imposes restrictions on the timing and locations where migrants can be transported. In particular, a 32-hour advance notice is required before migrants are brought into New York City, and they must be dropped off at a designated location in Manhattan unless approved otherwise.
That's not going to help. People are still going to come in, and this makes no sense. But comment below, what do you think of this whole busing people at certain hours?
Also, bus operators must arrive only between 8:30 a.m. and 12 p.m. Monday through Friday. Exceptions may be granted for bus operators who cannot.
I believe they started busing people to New Jersey and then to New York City just to stay within the law.
Adhere to these restrictions. Requests for exceptions must be submitted at least 72 hours before the scheduled arrival time in New York City. Companies that don't comply with the order's regulations will encounter severe penalties, including prosecution as a Class B misdemeanor, potential fines, legal action, and the seizure or impoundment of their buses. It wasn't up to 24 hours he gave the order. Over 24 people, including mothers carrying young children, came down from a bus into a dimly lit passage near the terminal. They retrieved their belongings from the bus's storage area and then proceeded under the guidance of volunteers to board a second bus bound for the city's Migrant Reception Center, located at the Roosevelt Hotel. To avoid the order, bus operators decided to start dropping off people in New Jersey. After these people are dropped off, they are led to trains to get to New York, which is
like I said, they work on the problem And look at that, Jersey and then to New York.
Their final destination.
Limits on when buses are allowed to arrive at the Port Authority. So in order to seemingly skirt that, it appears buses are arriving.
New York City, tired of this influx of immigrants by buses, sued Texas bus companies for over $700 million to reimburse the city for expenses incurred in supporting migrants who were transported to New York City.
Today, our administration filed a lawsuit against 17 companies.
The lawsuit covers expenses incurred in the past and expected in the future for migrants transported from Texas to New York City.
That's crazy. I didn't even know you could do that.
These expenses include housing, food, and medical care for migrants who are already present and those who may arrive in the future. The lawsuit claims that bus companies are acting unethically by financially benefiting from transporting migrants to the city. According to the city, some of the bus companies named in the lawsuit are the same ones that are now avoiding compliance with a government order by buzzing migrants to nearby New Jersey train stations instead. Texas Governor Abbott dismisses the lawsuit against him as baseless and deserving of punishment. He claims Mayor Adams is ignorant of the Commerce Clause and constitutional right to travel.
Yeah.
Abbott emphasizes that every migrant transported to New York City did so willingly with the approval of the Biden administration to stay in the United States.
Is baseless and deserves to be sanctioned. It's clear that Mayor Adams knows nothing about the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution or about the constitutional right to travel.
To make things better for the city and migrants, New York City will start a parole program that will give preloaded debit cards to selected immigrant families, staying in hotels instead of offering boxes of perishable food, according to Mayor Eric Adams. This one-time payment will go to approximately 500 families with children. Families granted access to the debit cards must sign an affidavit stating that they'll agree to strictly use the cards to purchase groceries and essential supplies for infants, such as diapers. The city anticipates saving approximately $7.2 million annually through the implementation of the pilot program, according to the mayor's office. But things won't be all rosy for migrants. Mayor Adams said single adult men and women only have 60 days to stay in the shelter. He went further to tell them to wait anywhere they wanted until they could get shelter. This has led many to the streets.
More and more people got to be aware of this crisis situation. Hopefully you found value in this video. If you did, go ahead and subscribe. My name is Noel, here on Verbal on Life, battling MS, trying to get more and more information out there. And like I'm telling you, this migrant crisis, more people got to be aware of it and contact politicians or do something. Send out a letter, whatever you can, so we could get this under control. All right? We could tell the mayor, you voted for this, deal with it now. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video.
Verbal on Life.